If you've been thinking about homeschooling your special needs child, this is definitely the episode for you. Things have been pretty exciting over here at Supporting Autism Mama. This month, they featured Supporting Autism Mama on Channel 4, and we're able to share some of our story as well as collaborate with an amazing brand. We've also dropped our first course all about sensory processing and how we can bring that into our homes and make our home sensory friendly. And this has all happened in the first week of June. I'm so excited to see what the rest of the month holds, but I know for sure one topic we're going to cover all month long is homeschooling. If you have even considered pulling your child out of the public school system to homeschool them in your home, this is the month to be a part of Supporting Autism Mama. We're going to deep dive all things homeschool. I'm talking writing your mission statement, all the way up to picking out your curriculum, making a routine in your home that's going to fit homeschooling, even how to create your own IEP at home. This is the month to be a part of Supporting Autism Mama. We have so much going on. This is the first episode in a series of homeschooling your special needs children. If you've thought about homeschooling in the past, this is definitely the month to be a part of Supporting Autism Mama. Hi, my name's Kimberly. I'm the founder of Supporting Autism Mama. We have socials, and then we also have this podcast that we've recently started to try to just bridge that gap from the time of receiving that autism diagnosis to adjusting to your new normal. Here at Supporting Autism Mama, we do not gatekeep our wins as special needs parents. It's my job to teach you all of the information that I have learned on our journey. And one of those things, and one of the most powerful tools that I have found for our family, is homeschooling. If you've been a part of the special education program in the public school system, and if you're listening to this episode, you've probably had some struggles. The public school system, although great, have the utmost respect for teachers in those facilities. They are made to educate for the masses, and especially children with special needs. It's very important to make individualized curriculum, make individualized goals for each one of those kiddos. And as hard as this system tries, my family went through 3 different school districts, and I just realized that it wasn't this individualized school district. It was because the school system is set up to educate the masses, and my children, unfortunately, do not learn quite that way. So it was at that time we pulled them out of the public school system, and I dove into homeschooling head first. I had no idea what I was doing. I am a nurse by profession. I've never written an education plan, but I figured out how to do it, and I'm going to teach you all of the things that I did to make our home successful. In this episode, we're going to talk about 7 things that I believe that you should do as a parent if you're going to get started homeschooling your special needs child. So let's get right into it. Number 1 is writing your mission statement. A mission statement is really just a fancy way for you to remember why you started homeschooling. So I want you to get out a piece of paper and just think about why. Why are you thinking about homeschooling? Maybe why have you already started homeschooling? Is it because you're trying to bridge that gap between family times and therapy and the juggling act that is? Is it because you want your children to have an individualized education? Is it because maybe your child needs to work on more of ADLs at home now than they do the academic side in order to thrive later in life? Or is it just because you feel like you're not getting time with your child because of the therapies you're constantly having to take them to after school? You can integrate therapies even into your home. And if you have the right systems in place, you're able to get that education and that therapy in less time than the 8-hour school day is currently right now. So to get some ideas flowing for you, this is my family's 2025 to 2026 homeschooling mission statement. Our mission this homeschooling year is to create a learning environment where children can grow at their own pace, explore their strengths, and develop more independence. Our goal is progress, not perfection. So you can be as creative as making this mission statement and hanging it up on your wall, making matching family t-shirts, maybe making a class flag with your mission statement. You can go above and beyond. What I like to do with our mission statement is to literally just write it down on a piece of paper. On those hard days, I have something to go back and look at and remember why we are homeschooling. Because although it looks very aesthetic online, and I'm sure if you're even considering this route, you have popped up on the homeschooling side of Instagram and TikTok, or whatever other social media you decide to use. But it's not as aesthetic as it looks like online. And some days are hard. And so it helps me as a parent to be able to have that mission statement written down so I can go back and reference it, so I can tie all of our curriculum to it, so that I can remember why we are doing what we are doing. For my family in the 2025-2026 school year, I'm going to put it on our outline. I have outlines that I write in weekly so that I can write out the kids' school for that week. And my plan is to just put it on that outline so that I can see it every week when I'm planning our schedule. I think it's just important to make sure that your experience is going to reflect your goals in the beginning. This is the first thing that I would do if I was starting over from scratch, is to make sure to write my mission statement and establish my why before moving forward. The second thing that I would do if I was getting started homeschooling my special needs child is to learn about the laws. So if you're in the United States, you can homeschool in all 50 states. However, each state, because homeschooling is at the state level, is different. So you'll need to look up the guidelines for your state. In the state of Missouri, I have to record hours. There's a few other things that I have to do in order to be kosher with the laws of the land when it comes to homeschooling. So I would get on hslda.org website, and they go through all 50 states and they tell you the laws for each state so that you make sure that you're compliant, whatever state laws there are. That website is also going to tell you the laws, and it's also going to tell you if your child is in the public school system already, how to pull them out and how to establish that. If they're going into kindergarten, it's also going to tell you what you need to do if they haven't actually started in the public school system. So again, you stay legal. The third thing that I would do, and I haven't actually done up to this point, but plan to do for the 2025-2026 school year, is to create an IEP at home. So next week, I'm actually going to do a deep dive into how to create an IEP at home from scratch. If this is something you're really considering, maybe you're already homeschooling like me and you haven't actually done this in your home, make sure to check out next week's episode. But just for the brief overview of this episode, I just want to kind of tell you what an IEP is. So if you're in the public school system, your child might already have an IEP. And that's something that is accommodations. It's different things that your child can have done in the special education classroom if they're integrated into the general ed classroom. It's different accommodations and different things that your child can have in order to create a better learning environment for them. So if I'm pulling my child out to have individualized education and to be able to supply them with the best learning environment they can have, I think it only makes sense to hold myself accountable and be able to create an IEP at home. I like the idea of writing an IEP for myself because it's going to help me to reflect on my child's current abilities and then maybe some of their struggles so that I can help to bridge the gap in our home, wherever that may be. And I also like the idea of an IEP because it helps us to make measurable goals. I can look at their abilities and I can look at some of the things that are challenging for them and write those goals. But if I make them measurable also, then I'm able to look back and be able to assess if we're actually doing the things that we need to in our home. And it just helps me to adjust that roadmap as I need to. That's all I'm really going to cover about IEPs this week. But again, if it's something you're interested in starting for your family, make sure to stay tuned for next week's episode. And we'll deep dive into how to create your own IEP at home. The next thing that I think is really important for you to look into if you're thinking about homeschooling your special needs child is to just learn about the different homeschooling types. This is just going to give you an idea of how you're going to homeschool in your home because there's lots of different methods. In this podcast episode, we're just going to discuss 4. Is the unschooling method, the classical method, the Charlotte Mason method, and then the therapeutic approach. So first is the unschooling method. Although the word unschooling makes it sound like you're not educating your child at all, that's actually far from this method. This method actually just takes your child's special interest or whatever they're really interested in that week and you run with it. So there's no formal sit-down curriculum with the unschooling method, but it allows you to tailor each week or each day, even if you want to go that far, to whatever your child is interested in. It's a more natural way of learning. The classical method lets your child dive into how to think instead of what to think about. They use this through classical literature, do a lot of history in this type of homeschooling, and they're really big on like Greek and Latin. They like to deep dive into their schooling and try to go on to the philosophy more of learning and learn about how we learn or why we learn versus we're just going to sit down and memorize these flashcards. Therapeutic approach to homeschooling is a whole child approach. They're going to integrate more therapy, healing, support, emotional regulation. They're going to regulate before they educate. And then the final homeschooling method that I want to talk about is the Charlotte Mason approach. So this is where you use a lot of outdoors. So this is one of those more aesthetically pleasing, I feel like, homeschooling approaches, because they explore their love of learning through nature and through the beauty of the earth and just through living ideas. Charlotte Mason is a very nature-based approach to homeschool. The reason I just talk about the different homeschooling types is because it just gives you a general idea of maybe how you want your home to run if you're going to homeschool. In our home, we don't use just one method. We've actually probably used a little bit of all four of these. The two biggest ones we use in our home that I found this last school year that helped the most is actually that unschooling method and then that therapeutic approach. I think that it's very important to regulate my children before we educate them. One of my kiddos is non-speaking and is a major sensory seeker. If I do not have him regulated before we sit down and try to do school, we are going to get absolutely nothing accomplished. So we use the therapeutic approach because we do regulate before we educate very often in my household. I've also found with my oldest son, who's 8 years old, the unschooling method actually works the best. So if I am having a hard time teaching him fractions, try just have them bake, or let's try flashcards, or let's try pizza. Let's try all these different things and nothing was working. My son's special interest right now currently is the weather. He loves the weather. He loves natural disasters. So one of the things that I found that worked for us when learning fractions is to look at the radar or look at the rain gauge and be able to measure those things and then turn that percentage of we have a such and such percent chance precipitation or a tornado or whatever it may be and turn that into a fraction. It helped him be able to bridge that gap between something he's already interested in and something he was having a hard time comprehending in school. His special interest really helped us to bridge that gap. And so in our household, I think we do use a lot of the therapeutic approach and a lot of the unschooling method, but you need to figure out what's going to work best in your home. Fifth thing that I would do if I was homeschooling my special needs child for the first time is just be able to find a curriculum. I use the word curriculum very loosely because there are several open and go curriculums that you can go and find. I've had a very hard time finding an open and go curriculum that worked really well in our household. We've actually used several different ones, and I really just use it to figure out what subject we need to cover that week. There are great ones out there. I highly, highly recommend you to do your research. I do have a homeschooling bundle that I will link at the end of this podcast that will take you through each one of these steps so that you'll have a complete guide of how to get started homeschooling your special needs child. And one of the things in this guide is this section literally just has a blank page. I don't give you any recommendations on homeschooling curriculum. That's a lot of research I want you to do yourself. There's a ton of information out there. I just don't have a great recommendation to give you because I have not found a homeschooling curriculum that I loved for my children. So on this part of the bundle, I just give you a blank page so that you can do the research yourself and figure out what's going to work best for your family. For my family this year, I'm actually writing my own homeschooling curriculum. We're going to deep dive into the kids' special interest and use that to guide our learning this year. I do have some behind the scene work happening. Although I really appreciate the freedom that comes with the unschooling method, I'm a very type A person and I very much need my checklist. So although my children were still learning, it made me feel like we weren't actually accomplishing anything because I didn't have a checklist, because I'm very much a checklist kind of person. Although I know that's a hurdle I need to get over in order to make sure that we're staying on track, that I'm holding my children accountable, and that I feel like we have accomplished something. I'm actually in the works of creating my own curriculum. This is going to be specifically tailored to your child's education and their special interests, because I think that's something that really helps to drive home their learning, especially those children that are neurodiverse and just learn a little bit differently than those typically developing children. This curriculum is also going to encourage sensory breaks. It's also going to take into account developmental milestones wherever your child may have those at. And it will have a place to track ADLs, because I know that's a big thing in our community is sometimes we're thriving academically, but we still don't take baths on our own. We still don't brush our teeth. We still don't feed ourselves. And so I think that one of the great things about homeschooling is that it allows us to have a whole approach on our child, and it allows us to really see the whole big picture. And I wanted a curriculum that allows us to do that. So I am in the process of creating my own, where you will get the academic side of it that will be tailored to your child's specific interest. We'll have a guide to help us keep track of our milestones. It will definitely encourage sensory breaks because it's so important to regulate before you educate. And it will have a place to help track our ADLs so that we make sure we are seeing the whole big picture for our child. So stay tuned for that. The sixth thing that I think is very important if you're going to homeschool your special needs child is to set up the homeschooling environment. So if you have been thinking about homeschooling your child, you probably find yourself on the homeschooling side of TikTok and Instagram. And there's this great big debate in the homeschooling community if you actually need a homeschooling room or if you need a homeschooling space, because you really can just do it all at your kitchen table. Although I absolutely agree with that, and that does work for some learners, that didn't work for my learners. My kiddos are very routine based and they need very clear set standards for them. So it really helped us to have a place, don't need a whole room, but a place where we only do homeschool at. So we did create a homeschooling room, a whole room designated to our homeschooling. So it's time to go do our work. We need to come into this room, and then they just transition better because they know this is where we do our schooling at. But again, I just want to remind you that you need to do what's best for your family. So your child might actually perform better at the kitchen table. They might not need a whole room. They might not even need a corner of the house. They might just need a place in the room to keep the homeschooling stuff, and they just know to bring it out to the kitchen table. That just wasn't the case for my children. So I just want to share my experience, but always let you know, remind you to do what's best for your family. If you do decide to create a homeschooling environment, is what I like to call it. It does not need to be Pinterest worthy by any means. I have created a step-by-step guide to help you create your own sensory friendly homeschooling environment. And that is something that will be in the homeschooling bundle that I'll have linked at the end of this course. Because having systems in place is much more important than any aesthetic that's going to be Pinterest worthy or picture worthy or Instagram worthy. The last tip I just want to give you about getting started homeschooling your special needs child is one that I actually learned later on in our homeschooling year last year. I used to have a very rigid schedule. We'd have, at this time, we're going to do circle time. At this time, we're going to transition into math. This time, we're going to transition into language arts. And that was a lot for me and my kiddos. If there was something that just came up in the middle, I felt trapped. Like, we can't do that. We have to do math. It's math time. We have to do language arts. It's language arts time. But one of the reasons that we decided to homeschool was so that we could have more time together as a family, so that we could account for some of those changes that are going to happen throughout our day. Or if we're having a hard day, to be able to tailor their needs towards that. And so one of the things that I learned at the end of last year, unfortunately, is to not have a rigid schedule, but to just create a daily homeschooling routine. So this just means that I decided to set our homeschooling day up into chunks of time instead of very specific time. Morning, we would wake up and we would eat breakfast. While we were eating breakfast, my kids would use their morning cart and then maybe turn on the Leapfrog or National Geographic. They knew that those two things could go on the TV, and then they could use anything on their morning cart. And then we would transition outside. Outside looked like reading a read aloud while the kids literally ran around the backyard. They could use their water table. They could use their bubble machine. They could use any of the tools that we had outside while I read the read aloud. And then we would take a small sensory break and transition into math and language arts for each one of the kiddos, and so on and so on. I've also created a template for you to be able to do this in your home. I highly recommend breaking things up into chunks like this. Like, this is our core learning. Number 1 is going to happen here. Then we're going to have a small break. Core learning 2 is going to happen here. And then we're going to have lunch. Or whatever works best for your family. I think that having that big chunk and that flow is so much easier than boom, boom, boom. Like in school, you have math, language arts, history, you have hour after hour, right? I think in our home, it did work better when we had bigger chunks, bigger blocks of time. It gave me more freedom as a teacher, and I feel like it gave my children enough structure so that we were successful, but enough freedom so that they felt like they still had a say in what was going to go on in their education, which I think is really important when it comes to any education, but especially when you're homeschooling. The template for this routine will be linked down below. I also, in that template, will include some cards that you can put into a pocket chart so that your children can visually see what is going to happen next. If you're wanting to homeschool your special needs child, I think the most important thing that I could tell you is that I know you probably feel unqualified, but you're actually the person that knows your child best. Teach your child every day. We are actually therapists. We are actually teachers without having the credentials behind our name. It's important to remember that you know your child better than anyone. Because of that, you're going to be able to tailor their education to exactly what they need. I bet you can look at your child and know before they're going to have a meltdown. Oh, don't do that because that will cause this. You already know that, and some of the therapists and some of the teachers that are going to teach them in school don't. I think you have way more qualifications than you think to homeschool your children. I know my children better than anyone, and I know that I can provide them the education that they need to be successful. So it just comes down to being confident in your decision. If you decide to pull them out, then you've pulled them out. Now it's time to learn everything you can, set yourself up for success, and then be confident in that choice that you've already made. I hope after you're able to write that mission statement for your family, learn about the laws in your state, create that at-home IEP, look at the different homeschooling types, choose a curriculum for your family, set up that homeschooling environment, and then create a daily routine for your homeschooling day. After you complete all of those 7 tasks, I know that you will be ready to do this. Now is the time to prepare for the fall. All month long at the Supporting Autism Mama podcast, on all of my social channels, all the things that I do surrounding my little corner of the internet are going to be focused on helping you and your family learn how to homeschool. I think that this has been a game changer in my home. It's taught me so much about my children. It's brought us so much closer together. And I know that it's helped my kids meet their milestones. Something I feel very passionate about, and something that I think will make a difference in your family if it's something that you're considering. It's not for everyone, but if you've thought about it and you feel like it's something you want to do, but you're just unsure how, this is the month to get on my corner of the internet. I will share all the things that I know. We were going to talk about how to create our own IEP. I have an interview coming up with a homeschooling consultant that specifically works with children with special needs. I have several things in the works behind the scenes. I have several ebooks in the process, several printable downloads. I'm working on establishing a homeschooling curriculum that you can use in your home that's very specific to your child. And I will add anything else that you think that you need to get your family started. June is our month to figure out and get reset so that we are ready to homeschool our children in the fall of 2025. If you or someone else with a special needs child is thinking about homeschooling and you want to learn more, make sure to hit that like button, make sure to hit that follow button so that I can continue to sit down and make content for you and hopefully help you and your family. As always, make sure to follow me over on Instagram so that you can get daily updates. I break all the things I talk about in the podcast. I like to break them up into shorter form content for you to be able to digest slower if that's something that works best for you. I can't wait to share all things homeschooling with you this month. Stay strong out there.